Question is whether you are paying attention before it reaches your specific postcode, your specific zip code. 3.4 billion people live in countries that spend more on interest payments than on health or on education. The poverty line is a lie. They gaslit when they say cut down on a coffee and an avocado and tweak your spreadsheet a little bit. It's not going to work out. Housing, healthcare, childcare, they've all inflated. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Just because the markets are up doesn't mean your household stock price is up. You see, the US official poverty line for a family of 4 is $31,200 per year. That number was created in 1963 using food prices from 1963. So they just adjusted it for inflation every year and called it methodology. But if you update the formula using modern spending, the real world that me and you live in, the way the original economist said you actually should do so, the real threshold is not $31,200. It's $140,000. $140,000. Welcome to the video nobody wanted me to make, but everyone undoubtedly definitely needs to watch. So hello, my financially treading water, quietly furious people of the internet, I love you dearly. Today we're talking about the global affordability crisis, which is the polite, professional, economist in a room way of saying, why does it feel like I'm sprinting and going backwards? Why does it feel like I'm on a hamster wheel getting nowhere? Why does everyone in government tell me things are getting better, but I'm bleeding through every orifice known to man? And before you say, inflation is coming down because they told us so. Yes, technically, in the way that a hurricane technically is less intense once the roof is technically gone. Yep, the rate fell. The prices didn't. And governments everywhere are very, very smart at saying one thing but not saying anything at all, because they've missed the key number. The system is falling apart. People are being squeezed and no one is doing anything about it. So here's the story they told us. After 2008, central banks held interest rates near zero for a decade. Free money essentially for those of us who were lucky enough to get it. Not yours truly. Asset prices, obviously under those conditions, they went up. Houses, stocks, bonds. People who owned those things got considerably richer, and people who didn't got the inflation but without the assets. And then the pièce de résistance, COVID. COVID hit, childcare disappeared, commuting disappeared. Some families briefly felt unexpectedly solvent. And then it all came back with interest, literally. US home prices up 45% since 2020, more than twice the typical rate. UK household energy bills 52% above pre-pandemic levels. Food prices in Nigeria, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all around the world literally doubled, not increased like the government tells you month on month, but doubled. And I mean in a short period of time. So, here is the thing no one in power can admit or indeed wants to admit. The affordability crisis isn't new. It didn't start in 2022. The inflation of the last years didn't create the problem. It just revealed it was there already. A finance professional named Michael Green did something economists apparently couldn't be bothered to do. He calculated what it actually costs to exist in America, to exist in the West. Not to thrive, just to exist. 2 earners, 2 kids, no vacations, no luxuries, just a participation, kids. And you know what it came out to? Have a guess, because it's not what your government has been telling you. So here are the numbers, soberly. Childcare, $32,000. Housing, $24,000. Healthcare, $11,000. Transportation, $14,828. I've rounded it up. Required gross income to cover those basics of life, $137,000 per annum. Now, the median household income is $80,000. The median American family is, by the original poverty measure, living in poverty. They just don't qualify for any of the support that goes along with it. And the government will have you believing that everything is rosy. The stock market's up, assets are up, but real life costs are surpassing the real life income of the hardest working people in the world. So in the spirit of joyous information, allow me to introduce you to the Valley of Death. At $35,000, a family gets what they call SNAP benefits, childcare subsidies, Medicaid. At $45,000, $10,000 more, mind you, Medicaid disappears. The income gain is immediately erased by new healthcare costs. The net improvement, well done the mathematician amongst you, the net improvement is an absolute big fat zero. And at $65,000, sounds good, right? Sounds lavish. Childcare subsidies vanish completely. The $20,000 gain is followed by $28,000 in new tuition payments. A family earning 100 grand then is measurably in a worse monthly position than a family earning $40,000. Now, if you're thinking, Justin, that makes no sense, you are right, congratulations, because at $40,000 you're drowning, but the state provides a life vest. At $100,000 you're still drowning, but the state says, nah, you're flying high, you're fine, no need to help you out, you're good, you're rich, you're above the median income. Now, this is not a bug. This is the system. This is the government. This is the two-party state. This is Western democracy, built from decades of well-meaning policies that nobody ever assembled and looked at from the outside. And no one ever put the man on the street and the woman on the street first, but those with assets, asset holders, vested interest, those with the biggest amount of political heft were the ones that were saved, and everyone else was put onto the sacrifice pyre of history. And that brings me on to the squeeze, or how a war in the Persian Gulf became a food crisis in Sudan or in other countries around the world, and why that sentence makes more sense than it actually should. Back in the 1950s, we're gonna have to take a big history lesson here, so bear with me. So let's transport ourselves back to the 1950s, the Green Revolution, new crop varieties, synthetic fertilizers, large-scale irrigation. India managed to double their wheat production inside less than a decade. Magnificent, life-saving. But what was the catch? There's always a catch, which everyone, sadly, was too busy celebrating to mention. It was that the agricultural miracle became structurally permanently dependent on the thing we vilified the most: hydrocarbons, natural gas, fuel, oil. The world's food supply got wired to the hydrocarbon industry at every stage of production. And that would be fine, of course, mostly, if those hydrocarbons were spread evenly across politically stable geographies. And as we're finding out now, they bloody don't. They never have, and they probably won't ever. Now, about 30% of global ammonia exports, and bear with me, boys and girls, it's getting complicated, I know. The starting point, ammonia is, of all nitrogen fertilizers. It's the stuff that makes our plants and our food and our crops grow really big and really fastly. That's not a word. They all come from the Middle East though, and that is a real world. That's a real place with real geopolitical and geostrategic importance, as we're seeing right now. For example, Saudi Arabia and Oman supply more than 3/4 of India's ammonia imports. Morocco, they get 3/4 of their sulfur, and it needs to process phosphate fertilizers from the Gulf as well. Gulf countries account for 35% of the global urea trade. Saudi Arabia, they were the largest urea exporter in 2024. Now I understand. You think, how is this connected to my cost of living? Well, it really is, because they are all of the inputs into everything that you purchase and need to survive. For example, in Dubai, the Jebel Ali port, it handles 80 plus weekly shipments, servicing 150 global ports. Now, the UAE is one of the top 5 commodity re-export hubs on the planet, and I bet you didn't know it. But none of this is secret. None of this is classified. It just doesn't appear in the agricultural section because the agricultural section doesn't exist anymore. And if it did, it would be next to this shipping logistics column that also doesn't exist anymore. And this affects you in the real world. The price of your goods, the price of your tuition, the price of your mortgage, interest rates, inflation rates, and all of this matters, and it's not being handled assiduously or efficiently. So, the US-Israeli war on Iran, it's disrupted the Strait of Hormuz, okay? Yeah, it's a straitjacket of a situation. I know, terrible joke. But through which roughly half of the world's seaborne sulfur passes through, along with ammonia, along with urea, along with enormous volumes of food and commodities. Now, the World Bank's March Energy Price Index was up bigly. 41% up. European natural gas, 60% up. Crude oil at one point was 60% up. And that's in a short amount of time. The UN and these other agencies around the world, they're all warning that fertilizers could increase 20% in the first half of 2026. And the second half, it could be even higher. And in Britain and in France and in Australia and the UK and South Africa, all around the world, they are warning of this. And they're trying desperately to stop their citizens from hoarding. All of those things are happening in the same month. Estimations are that 45 million additional people are going to be pushed into starvation. And 2/3 of them are in some of the most precarious locations in the world. Sudan. 3 years of civil war, famine conditions across parts of its territory. 19 million people, just over 40% of the population, they're facing starvation. Sudan imported 54% of its fertilizers from the Gulf in 2025, the highest share of any country on earth. And all of the humanitarian aid, they all go through Dubai International Centers, UAE, and they're all having to be rerouted and rerouted because of the conflict. 3 additional weeks per shipment to a country already in famine. And yet, all of the major Western economies, they are also seeing cost of living ranking among the top concerns of their citizens. Everyone I speak to says home prices are unaffordable. Energy bills are ridiculous. Pasta sections feel unreasonably expensive. Matcha, God forbid we talk about matcha, because those things are true. And they're in the same world existing simultaneously. A famine halfway around the world, and an unbearable, unaffordable living standard in the other half of the world. Nowhere in the middle to be safe unless you're above that aforementioned media income line. Now, the political map of the affordability crisis is assembled really, really simply. In the advanced economies, if you're lucky to live in one, housing is a dominant driver. That's where all the money is. Energy is second. Healthcare in America competes with housing on some level as well. But in the UK, the Conservatives were ejected after 14 years of power. Now, some may say they were terrible, some may say they were great. Macron, he governs with an approval rating that makes engineers look nervous. And Trump returned on economic populism and signed a bill predicting to more than double the healthcare premiums for 22 million Americans and climbing. And the AfD, they were polling first in Germany. Mamdani, a self-declared socialist from New York, promising obscure rent controls, all won. Now, something is being communicated itself through all of this, all at once, but you have to be willing to read it. You have to be willing to see it. So what unites the Valley of Death, the 82% of French adults, and the 45 million people facing hunger all around the world? Well, it's not bad luck, it's structural, it's governmental. Developing countries are paying a record $921 billion in debt interest in 2025 alone. It's going up into the trillions soon. Million people live in countries that spend more on interest payments than on health or on education. 3.4 billion people. Now, if you were running that as a business, your CEO would be fired. When a war drives up energy, which drives up food, which drives up inflation, which drives up interest rates, which drives up the debt servicing costs, it all accelerates at once, automatically, simultaneously, incessantly, relentlessly, and fatally. And this is what we built. Congratulations. This is who we vote for. Again, congratulations. So, long story short, the affordability crisis is real, it's structural, and it's not primarily your fault. The poverty line is a lie. They just budgeted it better. And the advice is all gaslit when they say cut down on a coffee and an avocado and tweak your spreadsheet a little bit. It's not gonna work out. Housing, healthcare, childcare, they've all inflated from the 1963 averages that we determined where poverty really existed. Hold that all in context and don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Just because the markets are up doesn't mean your household stock price is up. We know it's not. You have Mamdani, you have the AFD at number one, you have Starmer pivoting, you have all of these governments around the world collapsing under the affordability crisis, and no one's offering supply side solutions. They're not saying build more housing, they're not saying add more energy capacity, they're not saying strengthen the competition policy. They're saying immigrants, executives, foreign governments, political rivals, political wars, foreign adventurism. The difference between those two responses tells you more about where your costs are going over the next 5 years than any government forecast will ever do. In most democracies around the world, they are being pursued slowly, poorly, or not at all. And if you're confused of what I'm talking about the solutions to your problems. They're not coming soon. It's not a Middle East story. It's not just an energy story. It's not an agricultural story set in a war zone. It's ammonia, it's urea, it's oil, it's gas, it's petroleum, it's benzene, it's natural gas, it's liquefied gas. All of these things, for anyone with the supply chain exposure to food or agriculture, it's a really tricky situation. Citizens of Sudan, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Tanzania, not to mention a few, countries importing the majority of their goods. This is not a financial risk, this is an existential risk. The difference between investor pricing the risk and the farmer who could not produce the food. Now that gap itself is a story about affordability. That's a story about crisis. That's a story no one is running. That's a story we cannot avoid, because if it happens to them, it can happen to you too.